My dear friend, if you are a lover of liberty, a lover of opinion, a lover of free speech, you probably are familiar with what has been happening regarding one Candace Owens. She's a very popular commentator of sorts. She is an influencer and a journalist, if you will, of renown. One of the probably the most powerful, the most important person on the internet today, by virtue of what she has been involved in terms of her controversy. Now, what is being lost in the current uproar is something which I want to bring to your attention. This is not simply a disagreement over facts, but a far more fundamental principle. And this, my friend, is the right of a public figure to question power without being declared insane or required to ask permission or being disqualified from public life. This is not about whether, and this is critical, this is not about whether Candace Owens is ultimately right or wrong or whether she's daft. No. Whether she is correct on every claim she's raised, that's not the issue. It is about whether she is allowed to raise the questions and the issues that she has mentioned at all without being subjected to character assassination, masquerading as some kind of critique. See, it's not the thought police I worry about. It's the thought vigilantes. Candace Owens has every right to opine on the Charlie Kirk case. Everyone. On federal conduct, on the role of the FBI, on internecine conspiratorial matters, on procedural anomalies, and on the behavior of institutions that historically demand scrutiny. And that right doesn't come from her popularity or her platform. It comes from the basic premise of a free society that last time I checked, I believe we lived in. A free society that citizens may question authority without being required to prove their conclusions in advance or to get prior approval or meet an ever-shifting evidentiary standard determined by others and designed to silence voices. Now, what Candace Owens is doing is not unprecedented. It is how investigative inquiry has always begun. It starts with noticing inconsistencies. It proceeds by asking why standard procedures were not followed. It also escalates only when answers are refused or delayed or obscured. And none of this requires a final conclusion at the outset. It requires curiosity and persistence and the willingness to tolerate backlash. Now, critics are attempting to collapse two very different things. Asking questions and asserting final proof. Candace has consistently framed many of her claims as anomalies and concerns or tips that require confirmation. She has openly stated when something is unverified. That is not recklessness. That is transparency. Yet her critics treat even tentative inquiry as some kind of a declaration of guilt. And that's not a good faith standard. It's a silencing tactic, which is what this is all about. The irony is that the same people demanding absolute certainty from Candace Owens routinely accept official narratives that later collapse under scrutiny. They did so with weapons of mass destruction. They did so with Russiagate. They did so with early pandemic claims, cases against Trump. Remember the Steele dossier? Certainty was offered loudly then, quietly kind of walked back later with no accountability. Anybody ever apologized to you about the COVID nonsense? Why is Fauci off the hook? What about Mayorkas? Remember those fellows? The public was never asked to retroactively punish those who amplified official misinformation. Yet, when an independent commentator raises questions early, she's expected to be omniscient or else risk being discredited. And that, my friends, that asymmetry tells you everything you need to know. Candace Owens is being attacked, not because she lacks evidence, but because she refuses to wait for permission. She's not operating inside a legacy newsroom with institutional legal cover and, anonymous sourcing pipelines. She's operating independently with a small team and finite resources. That reality shapes how information is gathered and released. And it doesn't invalidate the inquiry. See, it simply means the process is a little messier and more visible. This hostility that she faces also reveals how dissent is policed today in our country. Instead of rebutting her arguments, saying she's wrong, critics attack her tone and her motivation and her mental health or her alleged, loyalties. See, that's the thing. These are not rebuttals. This isn't the way you counteract an argument. They are substitutions for rebuttals. They allow opponents to avoid engaging the substance of the questions that are being raised. Now, this is not just this is not only with the Candace. It happens all over the place, historically and now currently. And this tactic has a long history. See, when authorities cannot disprove some kind of a contrarian dissident, which is redundant, I guess, they discredit the dissident. They discredit her. When evidence is inconvenient, the source is declared unstable. And this method was defined in authoritarian systems. But it also thrives in modern digital culture where, in essence, I guess reputational destruction can be crowdsourced instantly. Candace Owens understands this risk and proceeds anyway. That is not recklessness. That is courage. And she exemplifies an unbelievable courage. She may not always be right. She's also not alone, by the way, in this dynamic. Alex Jones's intervention, urging caution, doesn't negate her right to speak. It reinforces the complexity of the environment, of the ecosystem, I love that word, that she is navigating. Alex Jones represents a generation of alternative media figures who learned through painful experience how quickly and savagely unverified claims can be weaponized to destroy credibility. And his warning, by the way, is strategic. It's strategic and not ideological. It doesn't strip Candace Owens of her legitimacy? Not at all. It highlights the tension between urgency and endurance. And those two instincts often coexist in serious investigative work. One voice pushes forward to keep questions alive. Another voice urges restraint to preserve the ability to keep asking them. Neither role is pathological. Both are necessary. Both are required in a free society, in a commonplace, if you will, the marketplace, I should say, of free ideas. And what is dangerous is the growing demand that public figures choose between silence and certainty. If you don't speak, you're complicit. If you speak without ironclad proof, whatever that means, you're insane. And that kind of binary leaves no room for any kind of inquiry. It ensures that only officially allowed and sanctioned narratives survive. We don't play by that game. Candace Owens is refusing that trap, refusing it flat out. She's also refusing, by the way, the unspoken rule that certain institutions are off limits. Off limits. She doesn't abide that. Federal agencies enjoy a presumption of good faith that is not extended to private citizens. That presumption, that ideological presumption, is historically unwarranted. Scrutiny of power is not in any way extremism. It's the core function of citizenship, of what we're doing right now. We do it with others. That's all. So critics often argue, by the way, that raising questions about federal involvement is, somehow irresponsible. Heard that before? Irresponsible because it erodes trust. Okay, so be it. This argument reverses cause and effect. See, trust is eroded by secrecy that is inconsistent with, by the way, and inconsistent with accountability. See, that's the problem. This is what I want to explain. When procedures that she employs, when they deviate from the norm, people notice. You see, when explanations are absent, I guess suspicion grows. And blaming the questioner for public doubt is a convenient way to protect institutions from reform. That's what it is. Candace Owens is also being punished for daring to violate aesthetic expectations. She doesn't sound apologetic. In fact, she's not. She doesn't hedge excessively. She doesn't couch every statement or point in some kind of weird institutional language. And that, my friend, is interpreted by others as aggression rather than her conviction. Yet history shows us that this polite skepticism rarely exposes entrenched power. It is the persistent voice that forces answers into daylight. That's what it is. My dear fellow patriot, none of this means every claim she raises will prove correct. Absolutely not. Or that you will agree with them. That's not the standard. The standard is whether she is acting in good faith. Everything about her approach suggests that she is. She distinguishes between confirmed facts and tips. She invites corroboration. She signals uncertainty. She tells you. She withholds information that she believes requires more review, more careful handling. And these are not the behaviors of someone, my friend, chasing chaos. They are the behaviors, listen to what I'm saying, they are the behaviors of someone aware of the stakes. You got what I'm saying? The attempt in this case to portray her as dangerous or unstable is not a critique. It's an effort to deter others from following her and from listening to her and believing her. And the message, my friend, you know it is absolutely clear. Question power and you will be labeled reckless or a nut or some kind of a dangerous person who might even need prosecuting like they do in the UK. Persist and you'll be isolated. This isn't about Candace alone. It's about something else. It's about setting boundaries for acceptable discourse. A free society that cannot tolerate uncomfortable questions without resorting to, character assassination is not confident in its institutions. It's defensive. A movement like hers that demands unanimity and punishes any kind of argument or dissent isn't strong. It's brittle. Candace Owens has the right to opine, and that must be defended precisely because she is polarizing. Precisely because she's polarizing. Rights that only protect agreeable speech aren't rights. They're permissions. We don't go along with that. That's not who we are. Candace Owens is not asking anyone to believe her uncritically. She is asking them to look closer. That is a reasonable request. Because the proper response is investigation, not intimidation. Debate is required, not dismissal. We need to have evidence here, not this ridiculous outrage. And by the way, if her claims collapse under any kind of scrutiny, that outcome should be accepted. Whatever it is, fine. But if they hold up, that will matter profoundly. In either case, my friend, the process must be allowed to unfold regarding this or any other issue without weaponizing accusations of insanity or betrayal. We're not going to put up with this. Look, you got to know who we are. We've been called tinfoil hatters forever. History is clear on this point. nearly every major exposure of institutional wrongdoing. Everyone began with someone who was told to shut up, wait, or stop asking questions. Those voices were rarely celebrated at the time in particular. They were tolerated only in hindsight. Okay? So here's the thing. Candace Owens, whom I respect so much, is operating in that uncomfortable present tense space where certainty is unfortunately unavailable, and where pressure, my friend, is constant. Defending her right to opine and give thoughts and ideas is not an endorsement of every conclusion. On the contrary, it's an endorsement of the principle that inquiry and investigation and merely asking must be allowed to breathe. That's simple. If that principle, if that axiom, if that truth dies, the truth will not survive it. That's simple. So what I ask you, my friends, is to listen to me carefully. Use this as an example, as a way to test our First Amendment, freedom of speech, what is tolerated and what is not. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Please like this video. I have some questions for you to apply in the bottom, which I think adds a lot to our appreciation of the complexity of this issue. Please like this video. Subscribe to our wonderful channel. And comment. I've got questions for you. Comment regarding this. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Comment, my dear friend. Comment as you see fit.